Jim Brandstatter, the Lions radio network. Of course, the Lions are hosting the Philadelphia Eagles, a disappointing Eagles season, a disappointing Lions season, although they've won 2 in a row, Jim. And over the last 2 weeks, what has changed about this Lions football team? They beat obviously going to Green Bay is a real nice win, and then they beat the Raiders last week. So what's changed with Detroit?
Well, I think the biggest thing that changed is defensively they're playing better. But when they were in London and they just got hammered by Kansas City, they couldn't stop anybody. And I think the biggest thing is defensively, they played real well the last 2 weeks. And keeping Aaron Rodgers in check was unbelievable in Green Bay. And last week they did a nice job against the running game of Oakland. So overall, I'd say that's the difference. Because offensively, they're still not out of the woods. They're still inconsistent. So the biggest difference in their 2 wins the last 2 weeks has been the fact they played good defense. Because offensively, they've only put 18 points on the board both games and won both.
Sounds similar. Defense here has been pretty good, save for last week. Offense very inconsistent, yet when you look at Detroit, I think people look at that and say, all right, Stafford and Calvin Johnson, that's an offensive-minded team. Why have they struggled on the offensive side of the ball?
Well, that's the mystery of the whole Lions season. They've just not been able to hit on all 8 cylinders. And part of it is, I think, the offensive line. They worked the offensive line, reworked it in the offseason, and really it hasn't protected Stafford well. They're still way, way down in league stats in rushing yardage. They rushed for over 100 yards last week, which was, I think, the first time they rushed as a team for better than 100 all year. And I think that's been the big problem. The offensive line and the running game hasn't been going. So teams have been pinning their ears back and getting after Stafford and really hurting the passing game, which is their personality with Calvin, Golden Tate, Eric Ebron. They've got some good receivers and a quarterback with a rifle for an arm, but they just can't seem to get it going because they're always playing from behind the yardsticks.
Jim, earlier there was some moves made in Detroit in the middle of the season. Was that a distracting? I mean, right now, I got to tell you, I've done this for about 10 years, and, man, the end of the Andy era was pretty bad. It's getting real bad right now after last 2 games losing at home to Miami and Tampa. But was that a similar situation a couple of weeks ago in Detroit? Was it a bad situation around this football team?
Yeah, it was. The big thing was Detroit came into this season with high hopes and great expectations. I mean, they were 11-5 a year ago, and really a blown call by an official from beating Dallas on the road in the first round of the playoffs. So when you open up 1-7, that just was so disappointing for everybody. And the fans were just so upset. And Martha Ford, the owner of the club, said, this just, we got to change things up from the top down. So in the middle of the season, she did one of the, I think, amazing things that we haven't seen done in the NFL for a long time, is get rid of the president and the general manager. Boom, right there. And they're revamping their entire front office as we go forward. Now, whether that has any indication of why they've won their last 2, I have no idea. But they've just hired Ernie Accorsi as an advisor to go through the NFL and look for a replacement for the general manager. They have a new president, and he comes from Ford Motor Company, which, of course, owns the franchise, Mrs. Ford. And they're going about their due diligence and finding the right people to get this organization back to the winner. It's one of the few in the league that hasn't gone to a Super Bowl, and they need to get that way. They're too talented not to be a program that wins at a consistent level.
Yeah, similar here. We've been to a Super Bowl, never won a Super Bowl, so similar fan bases. I'm sure when things go south, they get tough on a knee-jerk reaction here. This Philadelphia team coming in, is there a lot of awareness in Detroit of how Philadelphia not only has struggled, but how ugly it's been here since Sunday, with a lot of negative reports about Chip Kelly and his future and lost of the locker room and anonymous players calling each other out? Is that something that has been talked about in Detroit?
Yeah, it has, but Detroit, not to the great extent that I'm sure it's going on in Philadelphia. And the reason why is, as we've just enumerated, the Lions got their own problems, They're all playing for a job because there's going to be new management in here next year. And so I think, yeah, you're right. It's I'm sure it's at nuclear levels in Philadelphia, but Detroit's got their own nuclear problems with their franchise. So it's like the players and still on the staff and all that, they're taking care of their own business. They don't have time to worry about what's going on with someone else. And so I think it's about getting it right here. So the other guy's problem isn't their problem. And I think that's the way they're approaching it.
Jim Brandstatter, color commentator for the Detroit Lions radio network. A couple of years ago, the Lions came in here on a snowy day. I think saying snowy is an understatement. That was an absolute
Exactly.
What do you remember from that particular game? I think that was a fun game to watch on television. Maybe not a fun game in the second half to call, but
it was crazy because literally, I'm going to tell you what, an hour before the game, field was clear. There was no problems with the field. Then at about kickoff, there was a white, coating, and then by halftime, there was about a foot of snow on the ground. The replay, basically, in my opinion, was useless because there were no lines to determine whether a guy was inbounds or out of bounds. So it was like the replay was useless, and where they spotted the ball was kind of useless. First downs were kind of useless. I mean, they tried as best they could in Philadelphia. I give them all the credit in the world to keep the yard lines at least shoveled off so that they could at least have 5 yards figured out. But literally, it was one of the most amazing snowstorms in that hour that field just got crazy. And Detroit had it going in the first half, and then Philadelphia ran wild in the second half. And that was pretty much the story of that game.
Yeah, I think LaShawn McCoy with over 200 yards in that game, and they just kept handing it to him. They just kept handing it to him and handing it to him. Let me ask you then, obviously there's a lot of surprise around the league that Chip got rid of a lot of those players. McCoy and Macklin and Foles was traded off. With this group that they have now, what's the best way to go after Detroit?
Well, again, I think if their defense plays well, Detroit's done a real good job against the run. So is DeMarco Murray going to be a guy that gets some yardage? I think with the problems that Philly has at quarterback, is it going to be Bradford? I know he's undergone concussion protocol. Is it going to be Sanchez? I mean, the one thing that they bring in is that up-tempo Chip Kelly offense. That's the one thing I think they all are concerned about, getting lined up in the right spot. And don't let that big coverage mistake cost you a big play. I mean, I think that's what they're looking at. But Philadelphia, again, comes in, and they've got offensively their own problems from a standpoint of who's going to be their quarterback, and is it going to be Bradford? Is it going to be Sanchez? Defensively, they've got really good players. I know Brandon Graham, he played at Michigan, and he's really having a nice year. D'Amico Ryans, I've always felt is one of the best linebackers going in the game. I really like him. And I know Malcolm Jenkins is an outstanding defensive back from Ohio State. So, I mean, they're talented teams defensively, but, offensively, if they don't get yardage, you know what I'm saying? I mean, they're an up-tempo team. If they go 3 and out in, a minute and a half on the clock, kick it away, and the other guy, holds onto the ball for 4 or 5 minutes, that up-tempo offense doesn't work. It needs to kind of feed on itself. And I think from the Lions' perspective, that's their key, is forcing that offense to get into a lot of 3 and out situations and then control the game a little bit with their short passing game and their running game against that defense to keep the offense on the sideline. I think the Lions got to go at it that way, I think, in order to be successful.
Well, tomorrow you can hear the coverage right here on 97.3 ESPN. Starts at 11:30 with Merrill and Mike. Jim Brandstatter and the guys on the Detroit Lions radio network, where the Lions, the annual Thanksgiving Day affair in Detroit. It'll be Philadelphia playing on Thanksgiving for the second year in a row. And that should be interesting to see how the Eagles come out with all the reports surrounding this team. Jim, happy Thanksgiving to you. Long-time tradition of enjoying football for you guys out there in Detroit. Enjoy the game.
Appreciate the call. Happy Thanksgiving to you, too.